Two arrogant black belts mocked the old man who walked into their dojo wearing a beginner's white belt. They challenged him to a light spar to humiliate him. They were about to receive a masterclass in pain. The dojo, Apex Karate Academy, was less a temple of martial arts and more a temple of commerce. The walls were plastered with vibrant posters of tournament winners, their teeth bared in aggressive victory poses. A large flat-screen TV in the waiting area looped flashy highlight reels of spinning kicks and board breaking. The air didn't smell of old wood and incense, it smelled of sweat, rubber mats, and cleaning solution. It was loud, filled with the sharp, percussive ki shouts of sport karate, a sound that valued explosive power over quiet control. Into this world of aggressive marketing and athletic ambition, a new figure stepped through the door, his presence an immediate and profound contradiction. He was an older man, likely in his early 60s, with a formidable, large frame that his simple, loose-fitting white kikoji, practice uniform, did little to conceal. A neatly trimmed salt and pepper beard framed a stern, impassive face, and his dark hair was pulled back into a signature ponytail. Most strikingly, around his waist was a clean, crisp white belt, the universal symbol of a novice, a beginner who knew nothing. This was Seagal. He had recently moved to a quiet property on the outskirts of the sprawling suburban town, seeking a place for simple, unbothered training. He had seen the dojo's sign, traditional karate, and had hoped to find a place of authentic discipline. What he found instead was a high-energy gym that had mistaken aggression for strength. He stood near the entrance, observing. He watched the students, mostly young, athletic men and women, move through their katas. Their technique was fast, sharp, and physically impressive. But he saw the tension in their shoulders, the wasted energy in their movements, the focus on outward appearance rather than internal centering. They were learning to be impressive fighters, but they were not learning to be martial artists. His dark, observant eyes missed nothing, and his expression remained a mask of calm neutrality as he waited for someone to acknowledge the old man in the beginner's belt. It didn't take long. A man in his late 20s, his muscles clearly defined under his crisp black gi, strutted over. His name was Kyle, the dojo's head instructor, a regional tournament champion whose face was plastered on half the posters on the wall. He had a shaved head and the easy, arrogant swagger of a man who had never been seriously challenged. "Can I help you, Pops?" Kyle asked, his tone a slick blend of feigned politeness and genuine condescension. His eyes flicked down to Seagal's white belt, and a smirk played on his lips. "I was interested in joining your classes," Seagal replied, his voice a low, even rumble that seemed to absorb the room's chaotic energy. "I'm looking to get back into training." Another black belt, Marco, leaner and with the sharp features of a weasel, sidled up beside his partner. He folded his arms, his own smirk mirroring Kyle's. "Back into training?" Marco repeated, drawing out the words. "From what, exactly? Did you take a karate class at the YMCA back in the 80s? The two instructors chuckled. A few nearby students paused their training, sensing a confrontation brewing. "I have some background in various disciplines," Seagal said, his face remaining impassive. "It has been a while. I am here to learn." "Various disciplines," Kyle echoed, a look of mock seriousness on his face. "That's usually what they say when they mean they watched a bunch of kung fu movies." "Look, sir," he said, his tone shifting to one of patronizing authority, "we run a serious academy here. We train fighters. Champions. This isn't a social club or a place to work off your midlife crisis." "Our warm-ups alone would probably put you in the hospital," Marco chimed in, enjoying himself immensely. "No offense." The offense was, of course, entirely intended. They saw an old man, out of shape by their standards, wearing the belt of a novice. In their world, a world defined by belts, trophies, and physical dominance, he was less than nothing. He was a joke. They were the gatekeepers of this temple of aggression, and they had no intention of letting this quiet, unassuming old man pass the door without first paying a toll of humiliation. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in our cardio combat class on Tuesday mornings, Marco suggested, his voice dripping with false sincerity. It's mostly for the local housewives looking to lose a few pounds. A lot less intense. A few of the younger male students snickered, their loyalty firmly aligned with their alpha instructors. However, Seagal noticed a young woman with a green belt watching from a distance, her expression clearly uncomfortable. She looked away when she saw him notice her. Seagal's gaze returned to the two instructors. He had encountered this attitude 100 times before, in dojos all over the world. It was the arrogance of the physically gifted who had never learned the wisdom of humility. It was the insecurity of men who defined their worth by the color of the cloth around their waist. He could have turned and walked away. It would have been the easiest thing to do. But then he thought of the students, the ones watching, the ones learning that this brand of dismissive cruelty was what it meant to be a black belt, a master. He thought of the young woman with the green belt, who knew this was wrong but was too intimidated to speak up. His father, a man who had seen real combat, had once told him, a bully's power comes from the silence of those who watch. He would not be silent. But he would not use their language of aggression. He would use his own. I appreciate your concern for my well-being, Seagal said slowly, his calm voice cutting through their mockery. The instructors paused, surprised by his lack of a defensive reaction. You question my background and my ability to keep up. You believe I am a novice. He paused, letting his words settle. Perhaps there is a simple way to resolve this. Kyle and Marco exchanged a look, their expressions shifting from dismissive amusement to predatory interest. What did you have in mind? Kyle asked, a dangerous gleam in his eye. Seagal looked from Kyle to Marco, then at the circle of watching students. A simple demonstration, he said quietly. Let me show you what I can do. Then, you can make an informed judgment about where I belong. The offer hung in the air, an unexpected challenge wrapped in the language of polite inquiry. A wave of excited whispers went through the students. The two instructors looked at each other, their smirks returning, wider and more predatory than before. This was better than they could have hoped for. The old man wasn't just going to be dismissed, he was going to be publicly and thoroughly humiliated. A demonstration? Kyle said, his voice booming as he turned to address the students. The newcomer wants to show us his skills. What do you all think? A few of his loyalists cheered and clapped, eager for the show. Are you seriously challenging us? Marco asked, feigning disbelief while his eyes danced with delight. I am offering to clarify my skill level, Seagal corrected calmly. You believe I am inexperienced. If that is true, then this demonstration will be brief, and you will have nothing to worry about. The logic was inescapable. They couldn't back down now without looking weak. All right then, Kyle announced, rolling his shoulders and stepping toward the center of the mat. I'll do it. A light spar. Just to see what you've got. The condescension was thick in his voice. We're not trying to actually hurt you, of course. Just a teaching moment. I understand, Seagal replied. He began to stretch, his movements slow, methodical, and surprisingly fluid for a man his size. He didn't just loosen his muscles, he centered his body, his breathing deepening, his focus turning inward. The students formed a wide circle. The young woman with the green belt looked particularly worried. Shouldn't we set up some rules? She called out nervously. For safety. No need, Kyle waved her off dismissively, his eyes locked on Seagal. This will be over before anyone can get hurt. Trust me. As Seagal finished his preparations, he moved to the center of the mat. He faced Kyle, who had assumed a flashy, aggressive fighting stance, bouncing slightly on the balls of his feet. Seagal, in contrast, simply stood, his feet planted, his arms loose at his sides. His posture was deceptively relaxed, yet perfectly balanced, a mountain of quiet stillness ready to meet a crashing wave. Ready when you are, Seagal said, his voice a low, calm rumble that seemed to be the only point of silence in the buzzing room. Kyle, eager to put the old man in his place quickly and decisively, exploded into action. He launched a series of fast, snapping front kicks and reverse punches, a classic sport karate combination designed to overwhelm an opponent with speed and aggression. The strikes were clean, powerful, and would have scored points in any tournament. But they never landed. Seagal didn't block. He didn't even retreat. He simply moved. It was a form of movement the students had never seen before. As Kyle's foot lashed out, Seagal's body would pivot just enough, a tenkan turn, so that the kick sliced through empty air. As a punch came, his body would shift slightly offline, irimi, and the fist would glide harmlessly past his head. He moved like water, like smoke, never meeting force with force, but simply flowing around it. He made Kyle, the dojo's champion, look like a man trying to punch the wind. After a flurry of a dozen strikes, none of which came close to connecting, Kyle stopped, breathing heavily, his face a mixture of confusion and growing frustration. The students murmured amongst themselves. This wasn't a fight, it was an exhibition of untouchable defense. Hold still. Kyle barked, his professional composure starting to crack. He charged again, abandoning complex combinations for a simple, powerful lunge punch aimed at Seagal's center mass. This time, Seagal didn't just evade. As the punch came, he stepped into it, his body blending with Kyle's forward momentum. His left hand gently guided the punching arm past his body while his right hand came to rest lightly on Kyle's back. He didn't push. He didn't pull. He simply used Kyle's own charging energy to spin him, unbalancing him completely. The champion stumbled forward several steps, catching himself just before he fell flat on his face. What is this? Some kind of Aikido trick? Marco shouted from the sidelines, his voice laced with accusation. Seagal returned to his calm, centered stance. It is the principle of non-resistance, he said quietly. I am using the energy you are giving me. The lesson was lost on Kyle. His face was now red with humiliation. He let out a roar of pure rage and charged again, this time a wild, powerful tackle meant to drive the old man through the wall. He was done with technique, this was about raw, physical dominance. He was about to learn his final lesson in movement, the one where he moved, against his will, through the air. As the raging bull of a man charged, Seagal remained a placid mountain. He waited. He watched Kyle's center of gravity lower, his shoulders tense, his eyes broadcasting his every intention. The students around the mat held their breath. At the last possible second, as Kyle was about to make contact, Seagal moved. He took one short, angular step to the side. As Kyle's mass hurtled past him, Seagal's hands moved with practiced, devastating precision. His left hand cupped Kyle's charging elbow while his right hand secured a grip on his wrist. He didn't stop Kyle's momentum. He joined it. He spun with the charge, his feet moving in a smooth, circular pattern, his body becoming the calm center of a violent whirlwind. He was now controlling Kyle's entire body by controlling a single limb. The students watched, mesmerized, as Seagal guided the larger man in a helpless, off-balance circle. Then, with a sudden drop of his own center and a sharp, upward spiraling motion of his hands, Seagal executed a flawless Shihonage, the four-corner throw. Kyle was lifted from his feet as if by an invisible force, his own energy now his undoing. He was projected through the air, his body arcing before he crashed onto the mat on his back with a resounding thud that echoed through the silent dojo. The fall knocked the wind out of him. Before he could recover, Seagal was there, kneeling beside him, his movements fluid and immediate. He took Kyle's wrist and applied a simple but excruciatingly painful finishing hold, Nikio, the second control. Kyle cried out, a sharp, involuntary sound of pure pain. Seagal applied just enough pressure to ensure total compliance. Do you yield? He asked, his voice calm, holding no anger or triumph. Yes. Yes. I yield. Kyle gasped, his face pale, his arrogance completely shattered. Seagal released the hold instantly. He stood up and stepped back, returning to his relaxed, neutral stance as if nothing had happened. Kyle lay on the mat, cradling his wrist, his chest heaving, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain, fear, and a dawning, humbling understanding. He had not been beaten by a bigger man. He had been completely and utterly dismantled by a superior art form, wielded by a true master. The lesson was over. The silence that followed was absolute. The silence was broken by Marco. He stormed onto the mat, his face a mask of fury and wounded pride. His partner, his dojo's champion, had just been effortlessly humiliated by an old man in a white belt. That was a cheap shot. Marco shouted, pointing an accusatory finger at Seagal. You used some kind of jiu-jitsu trick. That's not real karate. The students looked from Marco to Seagal, the tension in the room ratcheting up again. Kyle was slowly pushing himself to a sitting position, his face a mixture of shame and pain. Seagal turned his calm, unreadable gaze to Marco. There are no tricks in true martial arts, he said, his voice even. There is only principle. He provided the power. I provided the direction. The outcome was his own creation. I don't buy it. Marco spat. He assumed a fighting stance, far more aggressive and twitchy than Kyle's had been. Let's see you try those principles on me. It was a foolish, ego-driven challenge, born from the need to save face in front of his students. Seagal simply sighed, a quiet, weary exhalation. He had not come here for this. He had come here to train. But it seemed another lesson was required. As you wish, he said. Marco lunged, faster than Kyle had, but just as predictable. He threw a quick jab cross combination, trying to overwhelm Seagal with speed. Seagal didn't even seem to move his feet. His upper body swayed back just enough for the punches to miss by a whisper. As Marco's arm was fully extended on the cross, Seagal's hand moved. It was so fast that most of the students barely registered it. His hand shot out, intercepted Marco's arm at the elbow, and with a slight, almost lazy-looking twist of his body, he stepped in. It was a classic Aikido, the entering throw. Marco, caught completely off balance and with his momentum turned against him, was lifted from his feet and sent flying. He landed with a heavy grunt on the mat, just a few feet from where Kyle was still sitting in stunned silence. 2 head instructors. 2 black belts. 2 champions. Both defeated in seconds, without Seagal ever throwing a single closed fist punch. Seagal stood over the 2 fallen instructors. He looked not at them, but at the circle of wide-eyed, silent students. The atmosphere in the dojo had been irrevocably altered. The loud, aggressive confidence had been replaced by a deep, questioning silence. You see flashy kicks on television, Seagal began, his voice calm and resonant, filling the quiet room. You see champions holding trophies. You see colored belts hanging on a wall, and you are taught to believe that this is the measure of a martial artist. He shook his head slowly. It is not. He walked slowly around the mat, his presence commanding the complete attention of everyone in the room. A belt, he said, gesturing to the white belt around his own waist, is a piece of cotton. It is meant to hold your GI closed. Nothing more. It does not measure your spirit, your discipline, or your understanding. He stopped and looked at Kyle and Marco, who were now sitting up, their faces burning with humiliation. You taught your students that strength is aggression. That dominance is the goal. You are wrong. The goal of true Budo is not to win a fight. It is to achieve a state of harmony so profound that the fight never needs to happen. He looked back at the students. You learn to control an opponent not by breaking his bones, but by taking his balance. You defeat his anger not with your own anger, but with your stillness. You protect yourself not by building walls, but by becoming like water, flowing around the obstacle. The young woman with the green belt who had spoken up earlier was listening with rapt attention, her eyes shining with understanding. I did not come here to disrespect your dojo, Seagal said, his voice softening slightly. I came here seeking a place to practice. I wore this white belt because my journey is never over. In the eyes of the universe, we are all beginners. A true master understands this. A true teacher, he paused, his gaze resting meaningfully on Kyle and Marco, never forgets it. Seagal's words hung in the air, a powerful indictment of the culture Kyle and Marco had built. The students were no longer just watching a confrontation, they were participating in a moment of profound reevaluation. They looked at their instructors, then at Seagal, and the difference between them had never been clearer. One side represented ego, dominance, and fear. The other represented wisdom, control, and respect. The young woman with the green belt, whose name was Sarah, was the first to act. She walked to the center of the mat and bowed respectfully to Seagal. Then, she turned to face her instructors. I've been training here for 3 years, she said, her voice clear and steady. And in the last 20 minutes, I've learned more about the spirit of martial arts than in all that time. I'm sorry, but I can't continue to learn from teachers who believe humiliation is part of the curriculum. She then walked to the side of the mat, untied her green belt, and laid it neatly on the floor. Her action broke the spell. Another student, a teenage boy, followed her lead. She's right, he said. You guys are great fighters, but you're not great teachers. He, too, untied his belt and placed it beside Sarah's. A wave of rebellion, quiet but powerful, swept through the dojo. One by one, then in small groups, more than half of the students walked to the side of the mat and laid down their belts. It was a silent, powerful protest, a mass resignation born of newfound clarity. Kyle and Marco watched, stunned into silence, as their dojo, their kingdom, crumbled around them. Their authority, built on a foundation of fear and intimidation, had been washed away by a tide of quiet dignity. They had lost more than a sparring match, they had lost the respect of the very people they were meant to lead. The pile of colored belts on the floor was a testament to their failure. The next morning, the sun rose over a quiet corner of Memorial Park. There were no padded mats, no mirrored walls, no posters of champions. There was only the green grass, the tall oak trees, and a group of about 15 people gathered in a loose circle. It was Sarah, the young man who had followed her, and a dozen other students who had left the Apex Karate Academy. At exactly 7 a.m., Steven Seagal arrived. He wore simple workout clothes and carried only a bottle of water. He greeted the group with a slight, respectful bow. Before we begin, he said, his voice calm and clear in the morning air, understand what we are doing here. This is not about forming a new club or a rival school. This is about returning to the source. For the next hour, he didn't teach them a single punch or kick. He taught them how to breathe. He led them through slow, deliberate stretching exercises, showing them how to connect their breath to their movement. He taught them how to stand, how to feel their connection to the earth beneath their feet, how to find their center of gravity. Your power does not come from your arms or your legs, he explained, walking among them, making small adjustments to their posture. It comes from here, he tapped his center. When your mind is calm and your center is strong, your body will know what to do. The students, who were used to high-intensity drills and loud commands, were initially hesitant. But as they followed his lead, they began to feel something different, not the exhausting burn of a workout, but a deep, internal sense of stability and peace. They were not learning to fight, they were learning to be. Sarah looked at the diverse group around her, teenagers, adults, men, women, all moving in quiet unison under the guidance of a true master. This felt more real, more authentic, than any belt or trophy ever could. As the session ended, Seagal bowed to the group. I will be here every morning this week, he said. For those who wish to learn. He didn't ask for money. He didn't promise them belts. He simply offered his knowledge. As he turned to leave, Sarah called out, Mr. Seagal. Thank you. He paused and looked back at the group, a rare, warm smile touching his bearded face. "No," he said. "Thank you. You reminded me what a dojo is truly for." This story is a powerful reminder that true mastery is not about the rank you hold, but the respect you show. Steven Seagal, with his quiet wisdom, didn't just win a fight, he dismantled a culture of arrogance and planted the seeds for a new community built on true martial arts principles. Have you ever encountered a teacher or leader who profoundly changed your perspective? Share your experience in the comments below. Show your respect for the quiet masters who lead by example. If this story inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe for more narratives that celebrate wisdom over ego.